Had come back from a trip in the Sahara. We were talking earlier about one that people like Sterling Moss was on, and it was 16,000 miles back and forth across the Sahara, a long distance rally. We're sitting here in this actual pub, and that was in about 1973, and 4 or 5 of us were talking about motorsport. And even then, before sponsorship had really started, the only big sponsor then was Gold Leaf Team Lotus. They were sort of the first ones. And we're talking about the horrendous cost of competing in any sort of motorsport. And somebody said, well, I tell you what we'll do. Great idea. We'll start our own. Or why doesn't somebody start a new type of motorsport where we leave out all cash prizes, all commercialism, all sponsorship. Price stays down. We get the normal guy in. So what can we do? We thought, well, everything has been done with cars. And didn't fancy bikes. We'll race combine harvesters. So it was a great idea. We were well into the beer by that time. Everybody thought that was a capital wizard. But there were only 3 in the county, and the farmers that owned them refused point blank to let us near the damn things, let alone race them. And you know, on reflection, you can see what they were getting at. But then we were looking at this window, I think, and it was a lovely early summer's evening, and there were lawnmowers all over the place. You could hear them buzzing away like bees in a jam pot. And of course, one of the other guys had the brilliant idea. He said, look, of all the countries in the world, there are more gardens here, and every single garden has a lawnmower. And they've had lawnmowers for 50 years. There must be lawnmowers in every shed. So we stuck up a notice on the wall just there saying, British Grand Prix for lawnmowers will be held at Murphy's Field in Cold Harbour, Saturday, whatever. Like that, about 40 or 50 lawnmowers turned up. There were lawnmowers everywhere, but numbers on them. You couldn't stop. They were going up the road, down the road. The local copper left town. He just couldn't control them. We ran the race. Series of races. We ran relay races, Le Mans type start races. We even finished up with the tug of war, which was one of those we had 6 machines going that way, 6 machines with a rope, engines revving like mad, and it really was reaching a crescendo. It was like a grand opera. Everything was finished. The fat lady was screaming and yelling and singing a whole lot, and unfortunately everybody was straining. The crowd were going bananas. The rope went across a red hot cylinder head. The rope parked. There were 6 mowers went that way. There were bodies everywhere. 6 mowers went that. There were cows jumping over fences. Horses left the state. That was the first lawnmower meeting. It was pretty sympathetic because, remember, as I said, we were all fairly drunk at the time. So, you know, if you said we're going to race snails up a wall, everybody said, oh, it's a great idea. But like all these ideas, it fell down to 2 or 3 people to do the actual work. Mind you, there wasn't much work. We drew up a set of basic rules. And, you know, we still have those rules to this day. But the reaction of the youngsters loved it. They thought there was going to be a race, and it involved machinery, and it had engines. And that was the main thing. You know, men or boys like things with engines. And if you can race with an engine, it doesn't matter whether it's Formula 1 or karting or whatever, you know, you get your fingers dirty. And that's how it started. They liked it. They liked it. No objections locally. No, it was too painful. No, I did not. I wandered around saying, don't do that, when they were doing silly things. I did 1 or 2 of the races. Yeah, I did. I had one of the long races. We started doing long distance races. I did one of the 3-hour races. I liked background stuff more than the actual driving. When we ran the first year, everybody thought it was a great success. We had the prize giving back here in the pub. And there were people laughing and joking and showing their bruises and their burns and how they lost their fingernail and all that sort of stuff. It really was very, very good. We raised £60 and gave it to the local cottage hospital. And very quickly it was, are we going to do it again next year? So we did it next year, and a bunch of guys from Dorking came, you know, the town up the road. And they thought they might run one in their town. So we ran it there for them. Then the next year we ran 3 or 4 events. And suddenly, after about 3, maybe 4 years, we were running, I think, 8 or 9 events in little villages around Sussex. And then I thought we were beginning to get approached commercially by lawnmower manufacturers. And I thought, if we're not careful here now, somebody's going to grab this and go commercial with it. So we announced that we were holding the British Grand Prix, the World Championships, National Championships. Now, at this stage, we hadn't the faintest idea how to do it, but we announced we were doing it. And that was the idea, to keep other people out. And I thought, now, what we've got to do, what I used to enjoy the racing days was long-distance sports car racing. Long-distance stuff where you had a bit of night time. So we thought we'd run a long-distance race, as well as all the other races. Well, you think, do you do 24 hours, 6 hours, 9 hours, 12 hours? And 12 hours works very well for a weekend, because if you straddle the Saturday night with 12 hours, people can work Friday and work on Monday. And we did the first one in about 1977. And of course, a lot of us had sort of motorsport background. So, and I'd got involved with Sterling Moss a little bit in that rally in the Sahara I mentioned earlier. And he heard about this thing, and he, oh, hey boy, I got to do this, hey boy. And we said, okay, you can do it as long as there's no publicity. And he couldn't understand that, why we didn't want to publicise it. And we sheepishly said, well, we don't have any lavatories. So he said, okay, he wouldn't tell anybody. And he came and he didn't want any money. And he brought Derek Bell and Tony Hazelwood, and they were very good. And the locals loved it, because you could see what makes these guys great. You know, they're better than any normal person. They were thinking ahead. He wouldn't just go into a corner and go round the corner quickly. He'd be already planning 2-3 corners ahead. Sometimes he'd hang back so that he got a slingshot. It was very, very good, and I think that's what escalated the whole lot. Suddenly the whole county were really talking. The newspapers got interested, the radio got interested, and all the others. And then the 12-hour has been very good to us. It's a good event. Very. We've banned one team for life, and they're a major manufacturer of lawnmowers, and they blatantly, well, I won't say blatant because we didn't know about it, but they cheated. And we told them, you're out for life, ever. That name will not appear in Lawnmower Racing again. Silly. I think like any race, competition and tight competition where people are running fairly closely together and safely, of course, where the outcome of the race is in doubt up until the end. That's a good race. It's not a good race where one fella roars off into the distance. The races are very, very close now. The, you know, in the format of the rules that we have them, we've limited them very much. You cannot modify the engine. Engine has to be standard, and we check it. You can modify the gearing, but there is only a certain, you know, they have only one gear. And if you gear the thing to do 30 miles an hour, say, or 40 miles an hour, fine. But then it has a struggle going around the hairpins. So the thing has evolved, and you have about 40 or 50 lawnmowers now that are very evenly matched, and about 20 or 30 drivers that are evenly matched. So most of the races are very close. In the early days, we didn't have loos because we were out in the fields, which is all right for the men, they can go in the bushes, but we thought we'd be a little more civilized for the ladies. So we got hold of one of these little tents, you know, the Girl Guides. We borrowed from the Girl Guides, one of these green little things, and you put little ropes down to the ground with an Elsan, a chemical loo inside in the thing, and we cleaned it up and made it very pretty. And we had a table with a copy of Country Life or Home and Garden or something, and a little saucer with a sixpence in it, and I think we even put some plastic flowers in a little jam jar or something. It looked very nice. But unfortunately, during the middle of the night, and this was in the days before we had the automatic cutout. Nowadays we have a hook onto a driver's belt or onto a glove that if you leave and falls off the machine, it stops the ignition, you see, because the engine stops. But this was in the heady days of less sophistication before we got to that. And one driver was whacking down the straight at about 50 miles an hour, swerved to avoid something, where it fell off the machine kept going, 50 miles an hour, out through a gap in the straw bales, into the darkness in the bushes, and smack into the back of this tent with its chemical thingamajig in it. It also had a little old lady in there who had gone in there and was no doubt sort of thinking about reading the Country Life or leaving sick, and the whole thing exploded, the tent. There was blue chemical liquid everywhere. There was a seat of the thing went that way, there was the buckets went that way, the table, the canvas down, and the last we saw was a little old lady running into the darkness, screaming like a demented banshee. And to this day we have no idea who she was, where she came from, but we know she went that way somewhere. The aims of the association, there are two or three. Number one, is to have fun. Number 2 is to have fun with engines and something that moves so that you can race. And number 3, and a lot further, is if you do anything reasonably well, you make a few shillings and you give that to a local charity rather than in the Far East. You give it in locally, where I mean, the input is coming from the local community anyway, so we give any profits we make back to the community. Well, maybe they're not as forward thinking as the people down here in Wisborough Green. We have a branch, or another bunch of guys started up in Yorkshire, in Holmfirth. But they've never grown more than about 4 or 5 dedicated people, and they come down to our races, and they run an annual 6-hour race, and some of our people go up there, and they're good, but they haven't got... We've got about 200 members, between 180 and 200 members here every year that rejoin, and that's a good solid core to build on. And at that lot, we've got about, I would say, 60 that race regularly. And at any one event, any one weekend event, you'll have about maybe 30 to 40 machines turning out. That's good. I don't think you can go any bigger than that. We wouldn't want to. In the early days, I suppose I was, but that was mainly because I did the rules, and I had an awful horror of seeing people get hurt. Now, the competitors never think about getting hurt, so they'll take chances, and you've got to try and stop them doing that, so suddenly you're the bad boy. You know, it's like Daddy telling Johnny, don't stick your finger in the fire, that sort of thing. And you go up and you say, don't do that, and you come back 10 minutes later, they're doing it again. Then you get cross at them, and you know, being Irish, you say, if you do that again, I'm going to... And they... So he's a... But we've spread that a lot over the last 3 or 4 years, and they're good guys who are now running the thing. Some of them who were competitors, and that makes a difference. We're still pretty firm, but I think we all get on pretty well. I enjoy watching good drivers, no matter what they're driving, whether it's Formula 1 or lawnmowers. When you see people who are really good, nipping and tucking, Pat, that is excellent. But yes, I enjoy it, but I enjoy the planning more.